Hello, this is the backup video, once again reminded by Elizabeth, for ancient and medieval history on Thursday, October 8th, 2020. And we're starting with presentations. Reminder to those of you at home, you have presentations on your creation myths to send me in video form. Video form. There we are. So, sir, you may proceed.
Hello, my name is Stanley Lowe, and I'm doing Darwinian. So Darwin's theory is the change over time of an organism because of the changes.
Stan, just one thing. A reminder: if you want to, only if you want to, you can take your mask off while you present. Go.
Because of the changes in their physical, behavioral traits, which help the species adapt and overcome its environment for better survival. So there are two main points in his theory. All life on Earth is connected and related to each other, and natural selection, which is the mechanism of how populations can evolve through modification, because of being able to adapt to help overcome environment. He proposed that new species come from pre-existing species, and that all species share one common ancestor. Each species has its own unique differences from their common ancestors because of natural selection, and that natural selection explains how a population can evolve by modification to become adapted to their environment. So natural selection, there are two. Natural selection can be a small and large. Change species in a small and large way. An example for small would be like changing in color or size over the course of many generations, and also if enough time, in a large way, if enough time has passed and many changes have piled up, natural selection can create an entirely new species. So many characteristics are passed from parent to offspring, and organisms are able to produce more offspring than their environment can support. And so there's a competition for resources, and in that population, organisms will inherit traits that will help them better survive, and those traits will become more common because there's going to be they're going to live longer. An example would be the common example of mice, where they move into a darker area with like darker colored rocks, an area like that. So the mice who have lighter color will get killed first because they're like easier to spot and see, while the darker ones will, I guess, live more. And because there can be less lighter mice, they will not gonna be able to reach the stage to reproduce, and so there's gonna be more darker colored mice to reproduce, and so the next generation there will be more, there will be more darker colored mice, and will become more common, and yeah.
Now, understand, when I scheduled these, remember, I thought we were going to have A and B days, so I didn't intend that you'd be presenting one right after the other saying similar things. So, regrets, but I'm sure you're going to say some different things. Please proceed.
I, too, did the Darwinian myth. As he said, the theory mainly
And you are?
Talia Smith.
Thank you.
The theory mainly focuses on the evolution of species over time, adapting to its surroundings and new predators as they too adapt, changing to survive, so that the predators can no longer easily spot them, or to change because the environment is becoming more and more dangerous to their current state. An example of this is our modern day whale is in fact one of its ancient ancestors is more of a hyena-like creature who then evolved into what we see now gradually over time. And because gradually over time they do the same thing. Anyways, because the habitat began to become more filled with water. And sorry, I don't like speaking in front of groups.
You're doing good.
Anyways, and as they adapt, they can either become more or less like what they used to be. Some creatures, in fact, look evolved from and back in like experience, like animal can evolve to look like something else, and then later, or as it changes again, they can evolve to look more like what they did. And the study of various animals has proven that you can actually be watched to see how different animals adapt to their surroundings through evolution, whether by generations or just by short intervals of time.
Okay. Just before we go on to Tolkien, a few things I want you to know about the natural selection. First off, the section that was included in your myths was from the last section of The Origin of Species. And those who think that there's a hard line between science and faith might do well to note that Darwin himself references a first cause, a creator. He says that the processes of life that we see around us have been shaping life since their first creation. But he references a first creation. He doesn't necessarily say God, but he certainly doesn't deny it either. In fact, he references a first cause or a creator. Secondly, the examples that they gave are the whales and the mice are good. My favorite example is an adaptation caused by man. In the 1200s, there was a battle between two clans of Japanese samurai. And these samurai chose to fight at sea rather than on land. So you have this unusual situation of a naval battle among samurai. A lot of samurai were killed. Now, if you're familiar with what a Japanese knight looks like in his armor, the samurai will often wear a face mask under their helmet to protect their face. And the face looks a bit like an oni, which is a Japanese demon. Or ogre. After the battle, the fishermen, who very low class compared to the samurai, go about their business and they begin, doing what they did before, which is catch crabs, among other things. Well, they began to notice that some of the crabs had this odd pattern on their back. And so what they did, because reincarnation is something that they understood because of the Buddhist influence in Japan, is they said, oh my God, these are the reborn souls of samurai. We can't harvest these. If we do, and the samurai find out that we're eating samurai souls, they'll wipe us out, which they would. So they threw them back. 800 years later, the dominant species or dominant subtype of that species of crab in that area of the Japanese coast has that pattern. We have shaped nature in one of many ways. That is one example. So simply, in a struggle for survival, those who survive to breed profligately will probably perpetuate their species into the future, but it is competition. In fact, evolution is the most brutal competition you can imagine. Anyone who thinks that nature is peaceful has the perspective of an apex predator, which is what we are, an apex omnivore, predator, whatever. Most people don't consider how brutally violent and vicious the struggle for survival is for everything that lives over in the wilderness to the east of us and everywhere else. So thank you both. Sir. Unless there are questions or comments. Sir.
Since you all obviously have no clue what my name is, I'm Jackson Hermsmeyer. I researched.
Jackson.
It's
called custom, okay? A tradition. We name ourselves. Yeah.
I researched and studied the Tolkien creation myth, which was actually extremely interesting because it's the one true, I guess, fictional creation myth on here. It was written by J.R. Tolkien, actually not completely, as he died before his works could actually be published, and it's in the book The Silmarillion. It's the first chapter. It's only 2 pages, surprisingly. So, we go back all the way to the beginning of the story. It is surrounded by Eru Ilúvatar. He is the god, per se. And he creates a race of angelical beings which are a lot similar to the angels seen in Christianity. They have free will, but they still have to serve their god. And they rest in a place called the Timeless Halls, which is a place out of the universe, away from it, in its own little sector of space. And in the Timeless Halls, they perform great orchestrations of music. And that is the main way that the world is created and formed. And it is one of these angelical beings. The angelical beings are called the Ainur. His name is Melkor. Melkor is basically Satan of this story. He has many different ideas about what this music should be used for, and he despises his creator for using them in the way that he does. So during one of these great ceremonies, called the Anulindale,
I knew Lindale.
Alunindale, he disrupts the whole thing by completely changing his part of the song. And it's due to his immense power in this that causes other of the angelical beings to follow him. And this ends up creating a discord in the middle of the song. And it's what creates the evil and the bad things that actually happen in the world. And after this, Eru comes down and he's like, hold up, we can't be having this now. And he shuts off the entire thing. And then he shows all of his children a vision. And this vision is of the world of Arda, or Earth from our point of view. And Arda is a giant world full of mystery and life, and the Anur see this and they watch civilizations fall and crumble. They see the rise of man. They see the creation of life in Arda. And just as quickly as it was there, the vision vanished. And obviously the Anur see this world full of potential, full of life, and they're like, we want this. We want to be able to go to this place and create it and morph it into something that we would love. And so Arrow is like, okay. And he says one word. It's Ia. Ia. He says Ia. And with that, it creates the world of Arda. The strongest of the Anur go down, and they become the sort of greater gods of this world. And the lesser Anur go down, and they become the lesser gods of the world. And the Anur start to create and morph the earth. But Melkor has other ideas about how to do this. Since he is the Satan of this story, he wants to control and command this entire world. And so everything that the Anur create, he tries to destroy. And this eventually boils down to a fight between the Anur and Melkor. And over this extended period of time, such a long time, the earth, slowly but surely, all the changes are slowly made firm. It takes an extremely long time, but eventually the battling ceases, and the earth is left as the way it was. The Anur then create the first dwarf out of clay, and Eru comes down, uses the phlegm imperishable, and breathes life into it. And then the elves and the humans are created out of Eru's consciousness and life. And from there, it then branches off into the rest of the Silmarillion, which is imagine it as the prequel to The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogies.
Aaron,
You don't remember my name.
you're funny, Zoe. You really are.
Good job, Jackson.
Thank you. Oh, thanks, Maddie. Such high praise.
That's fine. I'm counting on Mira to fix all your mistakes.
Got it.
Okay, so I did the exact same myth, and it is centered around the Lord of the Rings Hobbit series by J.R.R. Tolkien, and the whole story is called Anulindale, and this also boils down to the Song of the Aenir, which are the immortal gods. So there's one being named Eru, but his other name, the most common name, is Iluvatar, which means the Almighty. Iluvatar created the immortal gods out of his thought, and they were the only ones there with him in the void, basically. He made them with an imperishable flame, also known as immortality on a deeper sense, and the way they communicated was through music and song and sounds and colors, and everybody was in harmony. But one Aenir decided that he did not want this, and his name was Melkor. He wanted power and knowledge, and he sought independence from the other Aenir. And he tried to find the imperishable flame, immortality, to use as his own, even though it wasn't for him to find. So Iluvatar announced that the Hall of Iluvatar, and it was a mighty theme, and they conjured up great harmonies, musics, and just melodies that made like bigger pictures and large sounds and colors, bigger than anything they ever saw. So the Aenir were in awe of Iluvatar. They created his harmony and his theme that eventually, created Iluvatar's whole music. And Iluvatar's hall was brimming with music, sounds, and colors. And I have a picture just of the sheer beauty of it. And then Melkor decided that he wanted to put his song into the Hall of Iluvatar as well. But his song was of chaos and destruction, and the Aenir around Melkor faltered in their own song. And the whole theme decided to diminish. And Iluvatar noticed. Okay. And then he went down and confronted Melkor. And this confrontation divided a whole separation between Melkor, the Aenir, and Iluvatar, which set a whole boundary between the three of them as a whole. And Iluvatar decided to show the Aenir the world as they know it, the fall, the creation, light, everything. And the children of Iluvatar, which he breathed life into. And the Aenir had the job of creating this world for the children of Iluvatar, and they used their powers to mold the world as they knew it, using their songs and imagination. And throughout all this, Melkor sought to unwind it, or destroy what they thought they needed. And Melkor basically wove himself into the earth, trying to become one of the Aenir, and feigning for the people that he was one of them, even though all he wanted was to destroy them. And this continues on through the Lord of the Rings series, this battle between good and evil, the Aenir and Melkor.
Thank you. All right. What I would have you know, first of all, is why I chose Tolkien. A, he's one of my favorite writers. And his intent, well, the Bible is more important to me than the Lord of the Rings, and Dune is about as important to me as Lord of the Rings. But those are the top three books in my world. But aside from my respect for Professor Tolkien, I found his description of creation as an act of music wondrous. Eru Iluvatar is the creator. And J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic in England at a time when being a Catholic was not easy, because England has the Church of England. It's very, very Protestant. Tolkien comes up with a myth a myth cycle for modern England, including a creation myth. And in this myth, God uses the angels to create. Angels are basically the hands of God in Christian ideas anyway. Whether they have an independent existence beyond God using them for things is a matter for discussion. But in this case, the angels are the ones who make Iluvatar's music. But as they said, Melkor has his own ideas. And the first sin in this type of religion is, hey, God, you missed a spot. Hey, God, you didn't do quite so good here. Let me fix that for you. Second-guessing an omniscient and omnipotent being who just created you is pretty gutsy. And Melkor does it. And so picture the music that the Ainur are making to please Iluvatar as something like an opera or a beautiful classical symphony. And then picture Melkor's music as death metal. Trying to harmonize those two is impossible. They're fundamentally different types of music. And eventually there's a second music and a third music, but the idea of music building creation to me is just wondrous. So here's what's going to happen now. I told you that quizzes could happen at any time and in any way. In sometime just before, between noon and 5 afternoon, you can come up and get your quiz and take it. So you all should spread out, try to have an empty seat between each of you. You can study during the few minutes, about 5 minutes, between now and when I'll give you the quiz, just a sort of last-minute thing. And the quiz is going to be very simple and straightforward, and if you've been paying attention, you'll be fine. So look at your stuff, When we start the quiz, everything will go to the floor, and I'll want people to spread out. So if you please shift leftward, or from your perspective, rightward, so that I can use that seat. Miss, you please take the last seat over there. You slide over. At that. You slide over this way one. Miss, would you please come over here? Sit halfway between these two. And Miss Anderson, you're gonna take that spot there. So feel free to study for a few minutes, and then we'll start. And you at home, the quiz will be online in a bit.